Hey guys, it's Amy Miracle with mindfulartstudio.com. How are you? Thank you so much for joining me for the Art Journaling for Self-Care live workshop. I'm really excited to have you guys here. And I want to let you know a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. So we're going to be talking a little bit about my philosophy behind using art journaling for self-care and some techniques and tricks that you can use. And we'll be doing sort of a combination of, I'll be showing you some techniques that you can use, and you can use them while we're talking. I'm going to do a little bit more talking than I maybe have in some of the past workshops if you've been in with me before, because I want to kind of give you some of the orientation, because honestly, a lot of it is the way that you approach your art and your art journaling. But there are also some very specific techniques and tricks that I want to teach you. So we'll kind of be going back and forth between the two things today, and I'll be coming in and out with the art as well. So, yeah, and it looks like my chat, my Talk.io chat on my page is still kind of iffy. So if you want to hop back up on the Google+, I did enable the Q&A there so that you can ask questions and make comments and stuff. And you know that I love to have your comments and questions. And please also drop in and let me know who you are and what you're up to and what your interest is in art journaling and what questions you might have. I'll be really happy to answer those as we go along. And I also want to show you, so if you want to be able to do the chat, there's like a grid, I think it's up in your top right corner, that you'll find a Q&A box there. So just hit that, and then you can type your questions into the Q&A box and I can answer them for you. But I will check back and forth periodically on my page too, because it looks like it's coming in and out. I'm sorry about that. Maybe we'll get it figured out at some point. Still problem solving, but cool. So yeah, and before we do anything else, I want to tell you about something really special that I put together for you guys just for today. So when I was putting together the webinar, I decided that I wanted to give you like some worksheets and things about using art journaling for self-care. And I was so excited about it that those worksheets sort of turned into another mini ebook. So just for you guys, I'm offering that to you today for free. So if you look in your right side box, you should have a link there for mindfulartstudio.com/art journaling for self-care with dashes between the words, between art journaling for self-care. And if you go to that link, you'll see a picture and you can just sign up for that mailing list, and within the next couple of days, you'll get a link for your copy for free. And it's only if you sign up in the next 24 hours. So if you think that you're gonna want more in depth of what we're doing today, please sign up within the next 24 hours so that you can get it, because after that, I'll be kind of using it in some different ways and it won't be free after that. So make sure that you take advantage, okay? So cool. So yeah, so again, if you're just joining me, I'm Amy Miracle with Mindful Art Studio, and this is Art Journaling for Self-Care. So without too much further preamble, let's get started. So I hope you guys have with you maybe some markers, perhaps your art journal. You might have a little bit of paint there. If you don't have all those things, don't worry about it. Honestly, even if you're at your desk at lunch, you can just use a piece of paper, even a Post-it, and just a regular pen or Sharpie or whatever you've got, doesn't matter. And then go ahead and join us. So one of the first techniques that I want to introduce to you is something that I use. So one of the things that I hear a lot from people is that you get in the mood to do art, but you have no idea what to do. So that's sort of one problem. And a separate related problem is that there are times where you feel so unfocused or so anxious or so overwhelmed that, you have the sense like it would be a good time to go to your art journal, but it's very hard to kind of get started or organize yourself, and it's hard to know what to do. And so I have got a dirt simple technique that I want to share with you that I use and I find super, super effective. When I first show it to you, you're going to say, this is so simple, it's stupid, it's not going to work. But I think for a lot of people, a lot of my students in art classes, they find that it actually really does work because it's so simple. And you're also, I think, going to find that it becomes a lot more interesting the more slowly you do it, a lot more effective the more slowly you do it, because it's one of these meditative art activities. If you can really tune into the sensations of what you're doing visually, physically, it can really help to start to focus your mind and turn that important front brain back on that gets shut off when we get really overwhelmed and flooded with emotion. So all I'm suggesting that you do is just make lines in your journal. And I don't want you to make perfectly straight lines. We are not drafting plans for, you know, the foundation of the Taj Mahal here. We're making art, so it's meant to be imperfect. And it's interesting when it has little hills and valleys. And I'd invite you to really, really take your time, do it much more slowly than I'm doing it. I'm just sort of doing it a little bit so that it'll show up for you, so that I can talk a little bit. Really tune into what you're doing. Really slow down your movements. A lot of people lately talk about how calming, when they're in that kind of state, how calming they find coloring books. And this is a similar kind of thing. I don't use coloring books myself, but I find that this technique, it's such a no-brainer that it really starts to help me get focused and help bring me down, so to speak. So, and you can see how, I'd like you to open your mind a little bit and start to imagine how, if this is a page in your journal, how this could be the background for something at a different date, right? So there are two of the most important principles in the way that I use art journaling for self-care are focus on the process and focus on letting go of imperfection. Perfectionism is one of the biggest impediments to our creativity. It's like death to an artist, at least in the way that I work. I know that there's some people out there who are incredibly precise, and it works for them and they find joy in it, and I am all in support of that. But I think for most of us, perfectionism is the shackles that ties us and keeps us from creating. And so I'm really inviting you to approach your art journaling with a very different Eastern thought kind of beginner's mind, so that you're really allowing yourself, giving yourself permission to let it be imperfect. You want it to be imperfect. And I think it's helpful that you have things that are in process, right? So if you know that your pages are always in process, there's always going to be pages in your journals that don't look the way that you might like them to at some point, or don't look like something that you would consider pretty or a finished page. And that's okay, because it's going to be, either you're going to let it just be, or later you're going to go back to it and change it and work with it, right? So, you know, I always on the blog, I'm always showing you, you know, some of my best pages, obviously, because I want to inspire you and give you ideas. But I also want to show you some of my very imperfect pages where I've experimented and I've tried things out. So here's a more complicated stamp that I cut, and I was playing around with putting like chalk pastel over it to see what would happen with the ink and the chalk pastel. You know, it's not a page that I look at and I'm like, oh, wow, that's so beautiful. I'm so glad I did that. But I am glad that I experimented with it. I learned a lot and it influenced future pages, okay? So here's another one where, you know, I'm just painting, right? And then I was experimenting with circles and just playing with concentric circles and seeing what that would do. Now, this is a page that I'm pretty sure I'll go back to, and something interesting will happen with it. And it's in process, and so I accept that, and I'm okay with it. And so I really want to invite you to do that, to be okay, let things be in process, right? Like when you wake up in the morning, you don't look the same as when you get to work later, right? You're in process. And not everything that you do is going to be presentable. When you're laying in bed, you're not presentable to the world. And not everything in your journal is going to be presentable to the world because it's yours. And it belongs to you, and it's messy and imperfect, just like life. And there's going to be pages that feel beautiful and exquisite and amazing, and that's really important. But it's also really important to have pages that look like crap, quite frankly. And I find that when I let myself have that looseness in my approach, that it leads me to have much greater freedom in my art making, much greater freedom, so that I can approach it. And this is kind of the third principle, right? It's letting go of perfectionism, letting things be in process instead of focusing so much on the product, focus on the process, and also approaching your art like a child, right? And I don't mean that you need to be childish or make childlike art, although that could be a goal, but that, you know, think about the way that really young kids come to art. They're not looking at their artwork with expectations about what it's going to look like or what it should be, or they're not, you know, really young children are not comparing and looking at somebody else's paper saying, oh man, mine's nothing like that, mine stinks. There's none of that. It's just this joyous immersion in the experience of the paint and the colors and the lines, and you're in it. And that's what I want to invite you to do, to really be in the experience that you're in. And that's where the mindfulness comes in, right? You're tuning into the moment. And that's why play and immersion in an experience is so powerful and so healing, because it gives your brain a chance to go a little bit more offline and to kind of be drifting into some different brain waves that allow you to get into some more of that imaginative, metaphorical thought. And it gives all that like logical planning kind of stuff a break for a little while. So that when you allow yourself to experiment a lot, you open up a lot more room for exploration and learning new things. And so you'll go from having like a messy page where, you know, you allow yourself just to scribble and paint, let's say, right? You know, or you get something like this that's just experimental and it's not very attractive, to, you know, well, you're loose enough that now, of course, now I lost my page. Yeah, that now you can do something like this. Now, this may or may not be your style, but this happens to be a page that I really love. I feel really proud of. It's a page where I really got myself into that mindset of painting and drawing like a child and really just allowing myself to make forms and shapes. And that's what I want to invite you to do. There's so much freedom here. This is such a different piece than what I normally make. And it was incredibly fun because of that. I love the colors. There's so much to explore. I could write about it. I could do creative writing about it. Like, this is a jumping off point as well as being a piece all of its own. And so that's where some of the product comes in. Before I go on, I want to give you another exercise. So another variation on this, when you're not sure what to do when you get to your journal, would be to take a line for a walk in 5 different ways. So you might take your page and divide it up into 5 different sections, or you might do 5 different pages while we're talking, but let that line explore. You might do a squiggle like I've talked about in some of the other trainings if you've done them with me, or you might just explore like, what kinds of marks can I make, right? So actually, let me do this with a thicker marker so that you guys can see it a little bit better. You know, so what can a line do? What kinds of things can you explore? So, you know, this is one kind of line. It's a ragged line. And I would keep exploring it down and down and down and see how it changed and moved and what my impressions were. And I'm just gonna pause just to check over here. Yeah, I'm sorry about the chat, you guys. Again, I do have the Q&A up so that, no volume. Things can you explore? So, you know, this is one. Hang on, guys, one second. I'm gonna get off here. Okay. If folks are having trouble with volume, let me know in the sidebar. Hopefully that's not happening. Yeah, anyway, so take a line for a walk, right? So there's one way. Here's another way. Right, now you might try this or you might try your own, but just to keep experimenting, see how many different ways. And I think that's one of the points. Again, we come back to that playfulness, right? Like how far, and we talked about this in the stamping workshop if you guys were here last week, how far can you stretch any particular art technique or material? So right now we're stretching a line, you know, so what kinds of lines can you make? You know, you can make raggedy lines, you can make loops, you can make absolute scribbles. Right? You can see how if you make like a mountain range kind of line, how does it move and change as you go along? And as it develops, does it start to exaggerate? What happens with it? But really trying to move and change it, and allowing yourself the permission to experiment, to have pages that are just about art play and art exploration. These are not pages that you're probably, you know, if you're in some of the wonderful online groups, like let's say I'm on some art journaling groups on Facebook. There's a great one on Facebook run by Orly Oliveri, I think it is, and it's called A Stand for Art Journaling. There's some outstanding art journaling work in there. Really, really beautiful works of art. It's a lot of finished work in there though. So I love that page for inspiration. I love that page for posting maybe some of the works that I have worked with, and they've become one of those pages that I feel really good about and that do feel like a finished product, just, you know, the way that I would be a finished product, you know, the way that I got, you know, ready for this webinar today and prepared myself and didn't just roll out of bed. It's the same sort of thing. You know, but these pages are not necessarily for that. These are for you. These are your playground, right? Your art can be your playground, and your art journal can be your playground. And really, what I have found over the years is that if I let it, my art journal and the writing that I do in my journal is really one of the best listeners in my whole life. And I have some really great people who support me and love me, and that I really do count on and trust. But my art journal, you know, is the one that's there at, you know, midnight when I can't sleep and I need to get something off my chest. And, you know, I may or may not want to have a bunch of ugly venting in my journal. I might want to leave it because it's important, or I might want to use that space and transform that feeling and those sensations into something else. So, you know, I might take a page with writing, and we'll see if I can find this, and cover over it so that, you know, so it's gone, right? And I don't even think you guys can see that. There's only a few words left, but there's actually words under there, but I've scribbled over it. But really just giving yourself permission for that and for that imperfection. Another good example of that is the junk journal that I made recently, and people who are on my mailing list got a nice little email about how to make a junk journal that was really fun, and this is the one that I made. And for whatever reason, I just really absolutely love this front cover. I love this image, and this image is from a larger piece that just didn't work out. And you know, if you look at the journal as you turn through it, it's not like, not all the pages kind of fold just right. And yeah, like this one, you can see it's pretty crooked. You know, and maybe you're not okay with that and you want to fix that. But for me, I have to leave space for imperfection and the beauty of imperfection in order to get some meaningful art, and sometimes to get some of my most beautiful pieces. And so I don't throw things out. So I'll save bits and pieces of art that for me aren't really working. And then later, frequently, I'll use them in my art journal. So like this piece that on a page I'm going to show you is a really great example of something where I knew the piece was powerful, but it wasn't quite working overall, but there's some really great areas in it. And I made it many years ago, and it finally found a home in this art journal. I'm so excited because to me, it went from, you know, I added just a few little elements to this piece, and it went from interesting to, in my opinion, magical. And you can see that here, right? And if I had just said like, oh, this piece as a whole doesn't work, it stinks, and I got rid of it, then this wouldn't have happened, right? And here's the full spread. And I really enjoy that spread in this journal. And so that for me is the magic of letting imperfection in, that it gives you that room to explore and play and grow as an artist, right? I mean, that's just like kids. Kids grow because they play, and they play to learn, and we can do that too. So, so cool. And another way I want to show you to, when you're not sure what to do and you just kind of show up to the page, kind of similar to the scribbling, you can, with your markers, you can scribble with paint. So if you have your paint there, you can just kind of take out your paintbrush. And again, I'd really invite you to get into that beginner's mind or that kind of young mindset, and really just kind of try to paint as though you were that young kid, right? So you just kind of do whatever. And I might add a little white here. Okay, so you can see how me just scratching across the page, I already got like a pretty interesting exploration of color there. And I don't know about you, but there are so many landscape artists that, and abstract painting artists that I am just wowed by what they can do just by exploring with color. And so I think this is really an important exploration. So that's something else that you can play with. And my invitation would be to do either separating your page while we're working and talking right now, or do several different pages. If you need to separate the pages, wax paper or parchment paper is a really great way to do it so that it doesn't stick together and get fused. So you can try that. I also want to just pop in and let you know that if you're liking the workshop and you're interested in more of these kinds of techniques and tutorials, make sure that you follow the link in the right sidebar to go to mindfulartstudio.com and get on the mailing list so that we can connect that way. Cool. All right, so let's do another technique. So another technique that I use to really use my art journaling for self-care is I will frequently write, like I was saying before, and vent. You know, I'm the kind of person that I'm very, even though I'm very into art, I'm also very, very verbal. I really have to, processy is a term that may have been used a couple of times to describe me, maybe. So, you know, I really have to think things out sometimes in words. And I definitely also use my images to do that. And I'll talk about that in a little bit also. But I do a lot of writing about it. So, you know, I might do something like, you know, kind of like over a page like this, like vent all about what's going on and how I'm feeling about it and trying to figure it out and all those kinds of things. And, you know, I might do that in a really messy way. I might do that in a way that, you know, I'm sort of using fun handwriting that maybe looks something like this. And you guys will be able to see in a minute, I promise. At least I think so, right? So I wrote hurt, you know. So I'll use those spaces to be an interesting way to write, like, you know, and then I could come into this little tiny one and write in here, and then, whoa, I come out into the big open. So I go confused. You know, and then I might ask myself a question like, is it me, right? Like I'm frequently feeling bad about something and thinking like, is this me? You know, and you know, I'm guessing other people feel this way as well sometimes, but, you know, I really allow my journal to be, again, oops, trying to talk and write at the same time is tricky, guys. I really treat my journal in some ways, I like to pretend almost as though it's another person because then it listens better, right? So I'll ask it questions like, you know, why am I so anxious? What's going on with me? You know, why do I feel this way? And I'll write it out. And I find that that really helps me think things through. And I don't know if that's a trick you guys have ever tried. And again, if you've got thoughts, definitely jump into the Q&A on the side here. If you're on my webpage, we're still having some trouble with the Talk.io app. So if you want to be able to ask questions, you might want to hop back over here to the Google Plus feed. So so now I've got some writing in between here, and now I might come through with some paint and start to just kind of maybe explore and highlight a little bit some of my forms, right? So I obviously started with a stamped page. And then I put in some writing. And again, in this beginning stage, right, like what I'm doing right here, I might get those to a point where I feel like, oh, this is kind of, this is not so attractive. But maybe I can get it to express some of what I'm feeling. Or maybe I can get it to be sort of more of a hopeful image or an uplifting image, right? Like often if I'm feeling really down and hurt, I'll do things like draw a nest, right? Because a nest holds and nurtures, or a bowl, you know, or I'll make some sort of light. Or motions and movements with my marks that move up and kind of burst forth, because that's what I need, right? And so I'll let the images be for me what I need. So again, that's the sort of thing that I'm doing to take care of myself. So you can see again where there's this focus on kind of what I need emotionally versus what the art looks like. Okay, so let me come back in here. And I'm just being really loose, moving around. You know, you don't need to have stamps. I'm on a stamp kick at the moment. I'm like a stamping fiend. I can't stamp enough. I've even started stamping on my canvases. They're just so fun. They add so much. They're so fun to play with. And so for me, they're just kind of something I'm really into at the moment. You know, and I'll leave the words, but lots of times, like if I've vented, right, and I've got, let's say I've written all over the entire page, I might, for instance, like cover over certain words and then leave certain other words exposed. So it sort of highlights them. So, you know, for instance, I might cover over these words right here that say, "Is it me?" Because maybe in the end, after I write about it, I come to feel like, hey, you know, sure, it's always a two-way street, but partially it's because this thing is, you know, I think going on and I need to talk to this person about it. And so the focus becomes maybe that, wow, this page really conveys how hurt and confused I'm feeling. And that's satisfying. And that feels good to me. So like that. So I'm going to let that dry a little bit. And so it's really about building those layers. So while you guys are working on this, I want to talk a little bit about some techniques that you can use to really kind of cultivate and develop an art practice, because I think, kind of going back to the beginning, I think that's one of the things that people really, really struggle with. So, you know, I'm seeing that on the screen. It's really making me want to add a little white. It's funny, and this is about the perspective taking, right? This is part of the beauty of using art and art journaling for self-care, because when you are making art about your feelings, you take it from here and put it out here, right? And it's that literally getting it off your chest that's so valuable. First, because of the catharsis of getting it out of you. And second, because, you know, instead of seeing what you can see from here, which is a very particular and valuable perspective, suddenly now you can see it from a few inches or from 5 feet or from 10 feet. And you and I both know that that completely changes your perspective on the situation depending on where you are, right? I mean, so that's part of the beauty of using art for yourself in this way. So, and as you know, some of you might know that in addition to being an artist, I'm also an art therapist. So I feel like right now is probably a good moment for me. I feel a responsibility just to kind of clarify something, because there's been so much more attention, happily, to art therapy lately. And along with that attention has come some confusion, which I think is totally natural. As something gets talked about more, things kind of get shortened when people talk about it in the media, and so it leads to some confusion. So I really want to help clarify between using art for healing or self-understanding or transformation and what is art therapy itself. And the best analogy I can give is, you know, just like when you sit down with your friend Jen and you plop onto her couch and you start telling her about, you know, your issues with your boyfriend or your husband or your, you know, whoever it is. And, you know, she kind of talks to you and gives you advice and things like that. That's not therapy. In the same way, because, you know, the talk therapist would be picking up on things and pointing things out to her, you know, based on the training that he or she has. And in the same way, art therapists, you know, have very particular specialized training about art materials and art interventions and how they interplay and interact for certain people and certain populations and certain situations. And so in that same way, you know, when we all do art at home, it may indeed be very helpful and therapeutic and healing. And that's why art therapy is so powerful. But what the art therapist brings is all of that training, a treatment plan, goals. So it's a much more in-depth process where you and the therapist can be looking at this. So this isn't art therapy. You know, and certainly if people are feeling like they need more help or guidance, they should, you know, certainly talk to somebody. So cool. So enough about that. So some tips on how to develop a more regular art practice, art as self-care practice. So the biggest thing I like to share with my art students is keep something out and visible. And everybody complains about not having space at their home or wherever it might be. And I really firmly believe, have you seen some of those like tiny houses that have become so popular lately? I've seen people have art studios in their tiny houses. So I really believe if you truly, can tune into the part of you that really does want to have space for art in your life, you need to find a way to create some sort of art space in your home, whether it's in a portable art kit that gets to sit somewhere and be somewhere, or that comes with you in your purse, or, you know, if you're not a man that doesn't, you know, obviously carry a purse, probably, you know, that somehow you take with you in your car, whatever it is. And then comes back and sits somewhere maybe on your table or what have you. But you need to create that space. And also I leave things out and in process. So like, you know, if I'm working in this journal and I'm working on this page, right? Then I will leave this page out. I will leave out the watercolors that go with it, and my little container of water and a brush, and I will leave it out sitting so that every time I walk by, it's going, Amy, Amy, just 5 minutes, you can do it. And it's really tempting. It's like when the M&Ms are in the cabinet, right? You know they're there. But instead of leaving it in the cabinet or in your, you know, drawer, wherever it is you leave your art stuff, leave it out. Let it tempt you, right? You need to tempt that inner artist so that she's just, or he's just dying to do something. So leave stuff out. And again, if you're doing these simple little exercises, these are great things to leave out because they're obviously unfinished, right? They're just little playful explorations. And, you know, you could decide to come back to them and do something more with them, you know, like maybe, I mean, I don't know, maybe you come back to this one and let's pretend it's across the whole page. Maybe you come back to this one and every time it bumps up, you put a little dot, right? You guys know I do a lot with pattern and I really like pattern and respond to pattern. I think that's part of what makes art very freeing for me is that, again, I'm not always looking to necessarily make a pictorial image, but I'm allowing myself to play and explore with colors and lines and shapes. And that's part of where I get that emotional release, is to have that playtime. It's my playtime. And so, yeah, so keep things out, keep it mid-process so that it tempts you to keep going. And having an art space. And along with that is the portable art kit. I talk about it all the time. It's really important. I, for instance, just made a new zip pouch for my purse, and I got a new moleskin journal that I'm keeping together with it. It's small enough that it all fits together, and it's a very simplified one because I've been focusing lately on getting back to sketching and doing some blind contour drawing because it's so precise and imprecise all at the same time, and so beautiful because of it. So I've been really doing more of that. So another suggestion that I have for creating a regular art practice in your life is to make friends with other artists. You need to make artist friends. And you can do that in person by joining your local artists association or taking art classes. You can also do that online now. I feel like now that we are so accessible, there really isn't an excuse to say, well, there's nothing like that around me, because as long as you have connectivity to the internet, you can find anything. And there are just so many great classes online with online groups and so forth. my Starting Your Art Journal ebook that's just $3, and you can see that in your right sidebar. That one has a live, not a live, but it has an art journaling Google Plus group that you can join once you purchase the book. And there's lots and lots of choices. If that one's not for you, there's lots of other choices online. So really making friends with other artists by finding ways to connect. And you can also do that through free online artist groups like I talked about before. Those are great places to kind of connect with people and start to feed your inner artist, because those are the people that, you know, you're going to show them your work and they're going to encourage you. And as I was prepping for this webinar, I was looking through a props journal that I had made for myself probably 15 years ago. It was a gorgeous handmade paper journal that a friend gave to me, and I decided to put encouragement into it. So every time someone told me something really nice or sent me a lovely email, I would cut it out and put it in there. And when I was prepping for the workshop, I was looking through and I found I'd sent a friend a piece of creative writing that I had done. And he was a really talented photographer. And he wrote back to me, and all he said was, "Amy, you have to be an artist." And that was just so, like, you can see, even when I say it, like, it really makes me light up, because it was so powerful. And it was one of the first times that as I was in the process of really starting to own my identity as an artist, that somebody else had recognized it and really pushed me towards it. And that's what other artists are going to do for you. You need that, because you need those other people outside of you who get it when you don't, and who can say, you know what, just because you think that, you know, this thing over here doesn't measure up and isn't wonderful and blah, blah, blah. Look at all the beauty. Look at all the amazing things that you've been able to express. Look at this, look at this, look at this. Look at this gorgeous piece right here. Let's cut that out and do something amazing with it. That's what you need. You need those people holding you up and building you up. And not everybody in your life needs to do that. That's not their job, right? Like your brother or your best friend, just if they're not an artist, they might not get it. And it's not really their job to get it. So it's really about seeking out those people who can build you up. So yeah, and I would say too, making a commitment to your art practice is another really important element of using art for self-care. So I'm not saying that you need to do it every day. I'm not saying that you need to do it for hours and hours, but I do think that it's like anything else, it's a habit. And once you develop the habit, you're gonna be hooked. And it's gonna be harder to not do it than it is to do it, right? Because before you start, it's hard. But once you get into it, it's hard to not do it, because you need it, you crave it, because it's rewarding and it does something for you. But it does take that dedication in the beginning. So I always suggest to students to think about what feels like it'll be helpful, but also doable and a reachable, attainable goal. So for some people, that's 5 minutes a day. So they set a timer on their phone and they make sure they just spend 5 minutes. For some people, that's an art retreat for an entire weekend once or twice a year or something like that, that at least they know they do that. For some people, it's a much more middle ground where, you know, they spend, let's say, half an hour between 2 and 5 times a week or something like that. So sit down and take paper and think about what makes sense for you and what's doable for you. Even if you're using just those bite-sized pieces of 5-minute time, if that's where you need to start, start there, that's fine. And also know that when you're preparing for art, like if you're clearing that little space in your house, like that corner of a table that's gonna belong to your art stuff, because I know you're gonna do that, right? That is prepping for art, that counts. Because you're getting ready for that. If you're going to the art store and you're getting your materials, those are all the micro steps that one of my favorite authors, Sark, talks about. Those are micro movements towards creativity, and those are really, really important. So pat yourself in the back for those, because they totally count. They get you there. A step is a step, and it's much better than doing nothing. And then I also think that you need to lots and lots of toys to play with, right? So if your artist is playing, then you got to give yourself some toys, right? So for us, you know, it's gorgeous, wonderful little pens, or a new paint color, or creating your own stamp that you cut. or maybe it's going out and collecting natural materials, or, you know, deciding that one afternoon you're going to go scavenge for free, interesting, like, types of paper. You know, for instance, I've got a tutorial on the blog about using coffee sleeves to make it a mini art book. You know, those cardboard sleeves that you get when your coffee is hot. So it's not always about spending money either, if that's a concern for you. I mean, obviously it's a concern for everyone, but for some people it's even more of a concern. And that can't be an excuse, because so many things can be used for art. And then I think the final thing that really helps me to make sure that I'm using my art journaling for self-care is just to give myself permission to make bad art. So I just make art, and my job is to show up. That's your only job. Show up. Do something. Make art. That's your only job. All you have to do is be the conduit, right? It's as though when you can really open yourself up and let, you know, instead of trying to think everything through and just kind of say like, oh, okay, what's the first color I noticed? Okay, here it is. So this is the one. I don't know why, I don't get it, I don't understand it. Great. You don't need to understand it. I think we spend a lot of time thinking we have to get and plan and blah, blah, blah. No, let it be mysterious. That's part of the playfulness, and that's part of the joy that helps you turn it off and tune out a little bit and let go and flow. And then things suddenly can start to come through you, and things become magical and amazing. And for me, that's where the spirituality comes in, because it's that wondrous experience where I'm just as surprised at somebody who might be looking over my shoulder, if they were, while I was making art, about what's coming out. And that's so joyful, that's exciting, it's adventurous. And that's where, for me, it becomes self-care, because it's just this wonderful, playful, experimental experience, and I'm letting go of the product. Now, are there times that I get really caught up in the product? Of course. Of course I want some of my art to be pleasing to the eye and to look a certain way. Of course I do. But I don't make all of it be that way. I give lots of it permission to just be like this, where it's like, what is that? What's going on? But, you know, it's just exploration. It's just movement on a page getting recorded, right? Interesting way to think about it. So give your child artist lots of toys to play with. That's classes like we talked about. That's art materials. That's watching art movies, reading art books. One of my favorite new books is Steal Like an Artist by Austin Kleon, I think you say his name. He just pulls together so much of what I know to be true in one place, and he's got, you know, some other great insights in there. So that's definitely a book I recommend, so check that out. It was in one of my recent blog posts, not this past week, but the one before, I think. So you can find the link there. Cool. So those are my suggestions, and I know, you know, we don't really have people chatting today, but if you're feeling inspired and you want to drop into the chat box now with any questions, I'll certainly be happy to answer them. Again, you've got to, if you're on Google+, you can enable that by hitting the grid sign. And I want to just remind you about getting your free copy of the mini ebook, Art Journaling for Self-Care, and that should be in your right side there. But let me also give it to you. So that's mindfulartstudio.com. Oops. /art journaling for self-care. And that's where you can get a free copy of the ebook. You'll get a link in the next couple of days. I'm only offering this free right now for you guys. I really appreciate you being here, and I am super excited about being able to help people. This is really such a privilege that this gets to be my work, to do this. And the other place I really want to invite you, besides signing up for the the ebook and the mailing list, I'd really like to invite you into our Creative Self-Care Facebook group. It is a wonderful, wonderful group. Honestly, there are comments every day about how much people love being in the group and how supportive it is and how much it's really invigorated their art practice and encouraged them to really believe in themselves and believe that they are creative and that they are an artist. And I know that if you feel pulled to be in that group, that you're going to find the same thing. I am humbled daily by the amazing folks in there. And I know some of you are watching, so hi. Thank you so much for being here, and stay tuned, and we'll see you next time. Thanks so much.